A lady travels to the forest and soon discovers she cannot leave. An invisible wall prevents her from doing that. Neither knowing what it is nor where it came from, the lady is forced to live within its confines, in whatever way she can. However, on her inexplicable journey, she is not alone. A lady writes a letter, saying she lost track of time recently. She writes to not lose her mind. She says there is no one there to care for her, and she is trying to go through the cold winter months. Fear has entered her life. We see her residing in a cabin in the woods. She writes that if it were not for a man named Hugo, she would not be alive. The scene changes drastically to her riding in a car with an older couple from an earlier time. They eventually arrive at the cabin. The couple, Hugo and Louise, leaves her alone in there and tries to take their dog, but it doesn't obey and runs into the house. A short while later, the lady tries to pet the dog and it scares her. Day passes into night. The lady stays inside, spending time quietly with the dog, Lynx. The next morning, she hears Lynx making sounds. This causes her to come to it and let it out. Then she goes into Hugo and Louise's room and discovers they are still not home. This makes her uneasy, and she attempts to walk to the village with Lynx to search for them. While Lynx walks ahead of her, she hears it make a sound. She comes to the dog and asks it if it's hurt. The lady walks further, telling Lynx to follow her, but it stays there, though she doesn't walk much further because an invisible force prevents her. The unseen obstacle puzzles her, and she puts her hands on it in several different areas. It is definitely there. She sits and realizes the road is empty of people. This puzzles her even more than the invisible wall. After that, she walks to another area and observes two people at a cabin. But she cannot get to them, because she discovers the wall extends to that place too. The lady also notices that the people are still. They don't move. This prompts her to return to her cabin. While there, she narrates that at least she is with Lynx and not alone. Then she lays in bed at night. She soon gets up and tries to leave the cabin. Much to her chagrin, however, is that she learns the wall has claimed the entrance, preventing her from doing so. She screams in terror, but luckily, that was a nightmare. She wakes up early with Lynx by her side. The lady tells herself that she needs to stay calm and get through the situation. She also narrates that it wasn't the first time she had to survive like this. Soon the lady opens the front door and tries to touch the wall that she hopes is not there. It is not. Then her future self says that she forgot what she did that morning, perhaps due to it being hard on her. The lady looks at the other cabin once more through binoculars. The two people are still motionless. She reasons that if they are lifeless, then all previously living things beyond the wall are lifeless too. She also believes it could have been better if she went with Hugo and Louise. Following that, Lynx goes off barking into the woods. This seems to cause a cow to present itself. It somewhat heads in the lady's direction, which scares her to hide behind rocks. But she realizes that it's harmless, and so comes to it. Later, we see the cow at the cabin with her. The lady thinks it to be a blessing and a burden. She also believes that moment to be a transitory condition for her. And we discover she called the cow Bella. On another day, she drives a car and sees another vehicle parked ahead. So the lady drives to it and is met with more of the invisible wall. The car becomes ruined, and she comes out to touch the wall again. Afterward, her future self awakens with a cat on the bed. The lady fuels the oven and gets back into writing. She narrates that the next 10 days did not change anything for her. She had no choice but to face reality. We see her earlier self cry in bed. The lady thinks she could end herself or dig a hole under the wall, but she comes to believe that digging a hole might be worse than becoming lifeless. Also, Lynx and Bella prevent her from ending her life. As she looks through the cabin, the lady states she has many supplies for the summer, thanks to Hugo. After collecting some tools, she starts digging outside. A potato comes unearthed. The lady narrates how at that time, she winded clocks and marked off days on the calendar because she wanted to hold on to civilized life. She thought that she would stop being human if she did not, though she was not scared of becoming an animal. Rather, she was scared of plunging into the abyss. Out of that fear, she writes. The lady recalls how on one day there was nothing but rain. On that day, she hears a cat meowing nearby, so she checks outside and sees it there. After bringing it home, we see there are now 4 of them. And Lynx has become a friend rather than a pet. At some other time, she uses a rifle to fire at a deer, but misses. Then she goes back into the car she crashed and turns on its radio. Nothing but static gets emitted, so she changes it to a station where music plays. When the lady turns it off, she looks at a map. We soon see her exploring in the darkness with Lynx. During the daytime, she encounters a vehicle with lumber. She uses her newly acquired stick to detect the wall between it and her. The lady looks at it and sees it is motionless, causing her to turn back. Eventually, she gets to explore much of her surroundings, but she doesn't want to risk going into the mountain range. Next, she finds a cabin somewhere and collects its supplies. The lady then sits on a rock and looks through her binoculars to observe other houses. While she walks back home, she thinks about how she changed at that moment. She realizes what she is now becoming, as she is stuck existing there. Shortly after, the lady hunts a young deer and carries it back with her. But she does not like having to hunt and finish animals. On a particular night, she lies awake during a thunderstorm. Later, she discovers that her cat gave birth. The lady names it Pearl. She believes it has no chance to survive in her situation. Her future self states that on her first summer, she was more concerned for her animals than for her life condition. In the middle of July, the lady started harvesting hay. We see her struggle as she uses a scythe. Afterward, she collects and carries it on her back. As she walks back home, she touches the invisible wall. It is then revealed that it took her 3 weeks to harvest the meadow. And eventually, the lady becomes filled with despair. She narrates that she does not like remembering that time. Following that, we see her cabin is full of collected food. She now has a full basket of potatoes. The animals are cared for too, and are eating well alongside her. When she walks outside, the lady sees several dresses on a tree. Then she talks about how Lynx is almost always cheerful, and that life in the forest is a temptation for him. With Lynx, she could not stay sad for long. The lady even talks to him without knowing it. We see that she really cares for what is now her dog. In late October, the first snowfall occurred. The wind came with it, and she slept badly that night, hearing the baying of stags. She was also worried about Pearl, and the wind lasted long enough to take its life. We see the lady rushing to it outside with Lynx. Shortly after, she buries it. She narrates that it felt like the wind's goal was to end her cat. It is the first loss the lady suffered there in the forest. Eventually, we see winter being brought in full. The lady sees a fox and cannot bring herself to aim at it because she likens it losing its life to Pearl unjustly losing hers. She adds that she is the only creature in the forest who can commit right or wrong, and only she can show mercy. Furthermore, when she thinks of winter, that fox is what comes to her mind. But she does not understand why. Later, the lady tends to Bella and notices she has become bigger. She thinks the cow will give birth to a calf. And just like with Lynx, the lady now thinks of Bella as more than just an animal that provides for her. Afterward, she observes many deers, and we see her carry a lifeless one home. During the winter night, it is too cold for her to sleep, even though she added extra logs in the oven. As she lies there, the lady thinks about how she cannot stand bringing an end to animals. We eventually witness Bella giving birth. The lady has to pull the baby out and narrates that it is a bull. She says the deer have frozen because of the winter, which means one less luxury for her. After that, the horrible news gets revealed that Lynx has passed away, but sometime in the future. He was like a sixth sense to her, and without him, she feels truly alone. Subsequently, we see her walking outside with Bella, her baby bull, and Lynx when the snow no longer covers the ground. With them, the lady starts moving to a new area that she discovered before, the pasture. She had stayed at the cabin for 1 year and will never forget the summer at the pasture. We see her walking and enjoying her time with Lynx. At night, she watches the stars through her binoculars. The lady narrates that she was calm for the first time in her life. When she writes, she finds it hard to separate her new self from her old one. She also states it was impossible to remain a single separate self at the pasture. In the middle of October, the lady returned to Hugo and Louise's cabin. She made good use of her time while there and doubled her wood supply. On the 10th of December, She writes that time is passing very quickly, but her future self says she doesn't remember writing it. She believes she wrote that because she forgets about time sometimes. The indifference and omnipresence of time are something she thinks she has to get used to. When Lynx met his demise, the lady felt this more. As she walks through the snow, she narrates that there is no impulse more reasonable than love. It is the only hope for a better life. From her cabin window, she one day discovers a white crow. She does not know why the other crows don't like it. The lady comes to feed it, and every day she calls out to the crow. She wonders if her feeding is prolonging a life that should not be prolonged. But regardless of that, she wants the crow to live, and she wants another white crow to exist, so that they find each other. However, the lady does not think it will happen. We soon learn that she has now spent 2 years in the forest. In May, she sets out to move into the pasture again. We see her walk there with 2 grown cows. While looking back at living there, the lady narrates it did not feel like it did the previous year. At that time, she forgot that Lynx was a dog and she was a human. She knew it abstractly, but it had lost its past meaning. The lady also says that Lynx's biggest fear may have been to be abandoned alone. One day, we see her walking with him, and then Lynx hears something, which prompts him to run there. She runs after him and witnesses a man there, attempting to attack the dog with an axe. The lady runs home to collect her gun and runs back to shoot him down. After that, she sees that her bull and Lynx have been butchered. She comes to the lifeless Lynx and hugs him. Then she carries him to the house. What follows is her coming to the man she shot. She is glad to have taken his life and drags him to the lookout point, where she lets him roll downhill. In the evening, the lady digs a grave for Lynx. Following the burial, she was more tired than ever before. We see her remembering Lynx as he runs through the field in slow motion. On the next day, she leaves the pasture with Bella. And in October, she harvests potatoes and fruit. The lady finally stops her attempts to escape. She also wants to know why that man eliminated her animals. Soon though, she thinks it's best not to know. While she looks out the window, she narrates that something new is coming, and that there will not be other animals in her life like Pearl, Lynx, and the bull. On February 25th, the lady ends her writing because there is no more paper left. She sits there and listens to the crows and says she will soon go feed the white crow.